Well, good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday, Workplace Warriors. I am so excited to be here, but let me tell you, I am still tired. I think I shared with you last Friday during our Workplace Warrior Live on last Friday that I was planning to travel, my husband and my son and I, to my mom's, and because we were going to have a family get together, a big yard party in at my mom's house. She has a really large yard. Well, long story short, we worked like crazy, but everything turned out so well, and I am so happy. It gave me great joy for to see my family members, some of them who I haven't seen in a long time, and actually met a cousin who is 80 years old, and his he is a an author, and he and I have exchanged information because we share that passion for writing, and so that was just so awesome to meet him. He has written two books and a rewrite of one of those books, and you can find it on Amazon. And actually, I'll put the title and his name and the title and his website address in the description below this video, this live when it becomes a replay video. So needless to say, I'm tired. Had to go back. We got back on Monday and had to go back to work on Tuesday. And all three Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, of course, I was working in the office. And fall has come here, so the weather is nice and cool. And I had my alarm set for 6 a.m. I know I started my morning prayer, while I was still laying down, and evidently I fell asleep praying, y'all. And when I woke up, it was 6:38, because my bed was feeling so good. But I am happy to be here this morning, and today I hope that all of you are doing well. And we're going to talk about illegal interview questions. And because what I found is that a lot of people don't realize when they may be asked an illegal interview questions. I mean, some are very obvious, but some of them are a little different. And there are about 13 of them that I have for discussion right now. And if time allows, we'll go through all 13. If not, we'll stop halfway and we'll pick up Friday of next week during next Friday's um, Workplace Friday Live and finish out the set. So let's get started. Of course, I have my notes on on the screen next to me, and just let's just acknowledge, as I always do, that an interview, the preparation for an interview makes a lot of people nervous, and I definitely understand that and respect that. But what can make it even more nerve wracking is if you're asked a question during your interview that you know is illegal. It should not be asked, and you don't know how to respond. So we're going to talk about that today as well. So, excuse me. My allergies are still in full force. So the first one is, are you married? And that is a big no-no. Are you married has whether you're married or not, or who you're married to, has absolutely no bearing on a job, on your performance on the job. All interview questions should be job related. Now, right now, I know it's early on Friday morning, and my brain may be just warming up in this cooler weather, but I cannot honestly think of one job where an employer should be asking you if you are married. That is totally inappropriate. It is against the law, and we'll talk about how to respond to such questions a little bit later on. Excuse me. Next is, are you a U.S. citizen? And while you should be authorized to work in the U.S., all of that will come out later. So no one should ask you. An employer should never ask you during an interview if you are a U.S. citizen, because you actually are not required to be a U.S. citizen to work in the U.S. What the U.S. CIS requires is that you are authorized to work in the U.S. And so that does not require citizenship. You can be a permanent resident within the U.S., or you can be a dual citizen. But as long as you have the proper authorization from the U.S. government, from the U.S. citizen, and I forgot what the USCIS stands for, and that's just because it's still early in the morning. But it's the immigration service. As long as you have the proper documentation, which is a social security number, and basically that's it, social security number, then you are and you are authorized under that social security number to work in the U.S., then that is all that is required. And actually, employers have no need to ask those questions, because during the onboarding process, if they participate in E-Verify, which is the government platform that is the maintains the database of all individuals who are authorized to work in the U.S., it'll come up during that time, or you won't be able. Also, the other thing is when you have to provide during that process, you have to provide the proper documentation, such as there are three lists. There's list A on the what they call the I-9 form, the immigration verification form, or immigration employment verification form. On the back of it, it has three lists of appropriate documents. List A, List B, and List C. In List A, those are documents that are, excuse me, that stand alone to not only prove that you are authorized to work in the U.S., but also to confirm your citizenship as well. And the document that we most get from List A is a U.S. passport. And the reason being is because a U.S. passport has your picture, it has your social security number, your date of birth. The passport itself has a number that expires ever so often. You have to renew your passport ever so often, and there are some other forms that are considered to carry the same weight as a U.S. passport that are in List A of acceptable forms for the employment verification process, otherwise known as I-9. And then there's List B and List C. So if you don't have one of the documents that that stands alone as proof of your authorization to work in the US. You can produce one document from list B and one document from list C. So, what a lot of people who don't have a passport do is they provide either a copy of their birth certificate and their driver's license. I'm sorry, either their birth certificate and driver's license and sometimes a social security card, but most likely we're going to get a driver's license and a social security card. And so the driver's license, of course, will have your name, your current address, your picture, and your driver's license number, and the state that you're registered or authorized to drive in, and on a full your state of residence where the driver's license was issued, as and then your social security card will show your either it proves your naturalization status that you are authorized to work in the U.S. So just keep that in mind. So, but you should never be asked, are you a U.S. citizen? And there should not be a decision made based on that. The decision, employment decision by the employer should only be based on your qualifications or whether you are legally authorized to work in the U.S. And those documents will prove that after they extend an offer to you and they request those documents to complete the I-9 process. Then, are you or do you plan to become pregnant? Well, we all know that this is a hot political issue during this upcoming this general election where early voting has already started, mainly for president, and that is not your employer's business whether you are pregnant or whether you plan to become pregnant. That's just like, are you married? So just I'm practically speechless because as an HR professional for over 30 years, I would not dream of asking a candidate these types of questions. And yes, we have had candidates out of practically every organization that I have worked for. We have had candidates who um, did not share that they were expecting during their interview, and they may also have not known fully that they were actually pregnant. They may have suspected that they were, and then 8 months, 9 months later, after we've hired them, then or sometimes 5 or 6 months after we hire them, they share that they're expecting, or baby bump starts showing, and then 4 or 5 months later we have to decide just how we're going to work with this employee, or if we're going to be able, to work with them to maintain their employment and still, allow them to be out of work, away from work, the required amount of time for their bodies to heal after they've given birth. So yes, the employer can be impacted from a business operations standpoint, but because we weren't expecting that particular employee to have to be out of work so soon after employment. But we do not, as an employer, have the right to ask an employee or potential employee if they are pregnant or if they plan to become pregnant. Another is, have you ever been arrested? And what a lot of people, unfortunately, get confused about is it's not about whether you've ever been arrested, it's whether you've been convicted. And let me tell you what the article says about this question. It says this question is a doozy, because while an employer can reject your application due to a criminal history, an arrest or even spending a night in jail does not equate to guilt. Sometimes people are erroneously arrested based on false information, and some have spent a night in jail without being charged. That's why it's important to have all of the facts and why only convictions, as I said earlier, should count against you. And I can relate to this personally to a certain extent because an inmate tried to steal, well, didn't try, stole my identity. And when I was about to work for one of the court systems here in Atlanta, I was told by the person who ran my pre-employment background check that I have to laugh about it. I was a white male who was 2 years older than I actually was, and I was in jail, and I also had, I think, tattoos on some part or parts of my body. Well, even though my allergies may have me sounding like a male this morning, I am not a male, and I am not 2 years older, and also I don't have any tattoos. I choose not to have any tattoos on my body. So, I mean, it can even be a situation. I know someone else whose family member stole their social security number and was utilizing their identity, and that person had been in trouble with the law several times. Could have cost that relative could have cost that person their livelihood, their job, and everything. So just be aware that even if you have a questionnaire, like most employers are going to have you complete a questionnaire before they run a pre-employment background check on you, and that typically comes after they've extended the verbal contingent job offer, and that's why the job offer is verbal contingent. One is verbal to see if you are going to accept the terms, the salary, and all of that related to the job title and what have you, whether you're going to accept all of that. And it also gives them an opportunity to run the pre-employment background check if you accept the verbal offer. And the offer is contingent upon the successful completion of a background check. And there's going to be a questionnaire typically that when I'll talk in a minute. When you complete the questionnaire to authorize the employer to to run the pre-employment background check, one of the questions on there is, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And sometimes it'll say a felony, or it may say a felony or misdemeanor, or it just may see it may just ask about any crime, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. That's where you need to be very honest. And I'm going to tell you, we've also had situations where applicants who were successful during the selection process and we extended the verbal contingent job offer to them, we found out later that something showed up that should have been expunged, that they had gone through the proper steps to have it expunged from their record, and things that, like the article that we're referring to just said, some people are erroneously arrested. Some people spend a night in jail without being charged, especially in the case of mistaken identity or whatever, the police may think that they have the right person, the correct person who committed the crime, but they later find out that they don't have the right person, and then they have to let the person who they have arrested, and they have to let them go. And so sometimes that stuff is not handled correctly, and instead of that person's record no longer showing an arrest, sometimes that arrest is still showing up, and it shouldn't, because the person didn't commit a crime. So just keep that in mind too. And excuse me one moment, y'all. It's 7:27. You all know I have a 17-year-old. We have a 17-year-old in the house. My husband is still fast asleep, and I don't hear our son moving around in the house at all. And by now, he should have brought the dog up to feed her breakfast for the morning. And he is, I've seen nor heard him. So let me call him.
Please leave your message for 678908336.
And of course, he is not answering his phone. So let me call my husband and get him to go and wake the 17-year-old up. And of course, my husband's phone is not ringing. So I am going, and I appreciate y'all's patience. So I'm going to put you on mute. So my husband is waking him up. He needs to leave here for school by 8 o'clock, but he stays up too late, talking to his friends and his girlfriend. Then he doesn't want to get up in the morning. I'm sure a lot of you all can relate raising a teenager. So let's move on to the next question. So, another illegal interview question is: have you been injured on the job before? That is not any of their concern. If you've been injured on the job and you have healed, received the treatment that you need, and you have healed, that is the only concern as to whether the only concern from the employer should be: are you physically, mentally, emotionally, or otherwise able to perform the duties of the job that you're being considered for? Uh, and where that comes from is that some employers, they don't like hiring people who have had workers' comp claims before, and so they might ask a person, have they been injured on the job before, because they may be afraid that you might get hurt while you're working for them and cause them to lose money, or hurt their business operations because you're not able to work. So it says every employer wants to mitigate risk, and that is true, very true. But asking someone if they've suffered an injury on the job, in the workplace, before, is unacceptable. Even if you were injured, that should not play into whether or not you get the job with another employer. You do not have to disclose this to any prospective employer, and can ignore the question if asked. And we'll talk about whether or not you should truly ignore the question. We'll talk about the best way to handle that. Oh boy, So, next question is, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I think all of you probably are already aware that this is an inappropriate question to ask a job candidate. And this is one of the hot button issues that has come up in this current campaign. And so just know that your political affiliation is not up for discussion during a job interview. So an employer cannot ask you about this because it does not pertain to the job unless you are going to be working for an organization that is directly related to um, your political affiliation. For instance, if you're going to be helping with someone's campaign, then they will want you to be, of course, a supporter of the party that they represent. So that is the only time that your political affiliation should come into question. Um, Otherwise, it'll be considered a form of discrimination. An employer, an everyday mainstream employer, does not need to know who you voted for or plan to vote for, nor do they need to know your take on any specific hot button issues. Um, and because this article even acknowledges that because political tensions already escalated, it's a good idea to redirect the conversation or politely refuse to answer. So please keep that in mind. Could be a trap. And this one just gets me. Number 7, are you disabled? While there are certain disabilities that can impact your ability to do a job, the only question that you should be asked is, are you able to perform the duties of the job that you've applied to with or without a reasonable accommodation? And employers cannot come right out and ask if you're disabled. That's your choice if you choose when and if necessary to share that. And an employer also cannot ask you if you are taking any medication or about your mental health. So keep that in mind too. And if you do decide to disclose your disability, your employer is within their rights to ask what they can do to help you to overcome the disability in the workplace so that you can be successful in your performance. So just please keep that in mind. And a lot of employers today, even my current employer, we do ask people to self identify, which means that we just keep a track of um, employees who consider themselves to have a disability or they've been diagnosed as having a disability, and they have every right to not answer that question. The other thing is the question is asked, but our system is set up to where the hiring manager cannot see the applicant's response to the question, and definitely not the details about their disability if they do choose to share that. And no employment decision is made regarding an employee or a potential employee's disability or not having a disability. It is strictly for tracking purposes to let the federal government know that yes, we are an employer who is truly an equal opportunity employer, and we do not take that type of information into consideration when making an employment decision. What would happen is if your requested accommodation it requires more financially or within business operations than the employer can reasonably handle. That's why it's referred to as a reasonable accommodation. employers will make a reasonable accommodation. But if it causes an undue hardship to the employer in the way of their business operations or being so expensive to implement that they are unable to do so, then it is deemed an unreasonable accommodation, or it does not meet the test of being a reasonable accommodation. And typically, most people's accommodations are not going to be so great, and I shouldn't say most, but a lot of times what I've seen is the accommodations that people are needing. It might include a special chair because they may have hurt their back. They may have a health condition related to their back health, and they need a certain type of chair, or they may need like um, an air purifier in their air if they in the air in their work area to keep, I think they call them particulates, down, or they may have to take regular breaks, like diabetics need to take regular breaks and need to be able to get a snack ever so often to keep their blood sugar regulated. So those types of things, as you can see, those would be likely be considered reasonable accommodations, or a special type of desk if the person has limited mobility and have to utilize a wheelchair to get around, and they may need a desk that will allow the wheels of the wheelchair, which are usually pretty high, to for them to roll the wheelchair up to their desk um, and position them in a way that they can comfortably work at their assigned desk. So just things like that. So just know that you should not be asked if you have a disability during the interview process, but the employer can ask, can you perform the duties and responsibilities of this job with or without a reasonable accommodation? Now, that is a legal question so that they can get an idea of what they need to do to assist you to be successful. Next, what is your financial standing? The only time, and mostly this is around credit scores, so please listen. Some positions, such as those dealing with handling money or sensitive information, do require someone to be in good financial standing and have a good credit score. However, it is not okay for a hiring manager to ask you personally what your financial standing is. Your credit score, with rare exceptions, and the amount of money or assets you own is nobody's business but yours. But if you are an accountant or a finance professional, or you have a job that is going to be handling, we call it real or uh, real or not automated money, but real, which is physical, which is physical money, dollars, cents, as they call them, greenbacks. Also, credit card numbers. If you're going to be a person who is going to have a purchase card, or we call them P card, assigned to you, typically your credit score is going to have to remain in good standing. Or if you are we call it real or virtual money, and that means that you never actually physically put your hands on physical money, but the money that you are handling is going to be virtual, where you're going to manage bank accounts and things like that, and move money around in a budget, balanced budgets, and things like that. So just know that there are some jobs that can require and will require you to have a good credit score, but otherwise, most jobs have no reason to run your credit. So let's move right along. Number 10, what religion are you? And I think everybody knows that that is not something that should be asked during the selection process. Um, you definitely do not have to answer that question, and because it could be another way for someone to discriminate. If they're, for instance, Catholic and you're Muslim, or vice versa, then we don't want to give the appearance at all that any employment decisions are being made based on a person's um, choice of religious belief, and or if they even actively practice um, according to any religious beliefs. Do you have child care? Illegal. That's akin to, are you or do you plan to become pregnant? That's, or are you married? Nothing about your family status should be asked during a job interview. Um, the common sense person knows that you should have child care if you're going to be going out working a job. And what an employer can do is they can make it clear that if you are being offered a remote position, a position that works remotely, or is going to be authorized to work remotely, that working remotely does not substitute for appropriate child care or elder care services, or what have you, or family care services. If you have a family member who is either aging and needs a lot of assistance with their daily life processes, or if they are someone who is physically or mentally incapacitated and need assistance, the employer can make the statement very clear that working remotely is not a substitute for providing the appropriate care to your family member who needs around the clock assistance or frequent assistance with daily life activities. So, um, let's see. Moving on to number 12, any genetic or physical characteristics. So let's look at this one. I'm going to read to you what the article said about questions about any genetic or physical characteristics. Other questions among those that are illegal include inquiries into your weight, age, gender, sexual orientation, race, or nationality. In a private questionnaire, you have the opportunity to disclose some of those variables, but they cannot be brought up during an interview. And that's where I told you, that there may be some that my employer asked people to self-identify, and one of the self-identification questions is, have you served? Are you a veteran of the U.S. military? That's another one that should not um, be asked. And the article goes on to say that these types of questions can be viewed as discriminatory, especially if they were to keep you from getting the position that you're being considered for, that you're otherwise qualified for. So just definitely take that into consideration. Number 12, how old are you? Well, for one, women don't tell their age anyway, or a lot of women have adopted that stance that they don't share their age. And why? For one, when it comes to the job interview process, it's not necessary for them to know. Your age has nothing to do with your skill level for the job. So just know that you do not or you should not divulge your age if you're asked during a job interview. And where do you live? And actually, guys, I didn't think about this one. This one wasn't one that came to mind because some employers will use where you live as a screening, as a way of screening you out. Let's say this position might require you to have a very long commute, and they're worried that you won't be on time to work. Well, that's for you to work out. And if you don't work it out to where you're on time to work in accordance with established policies with your employer, then they can utilize their progressive disciplinary process to um, to address your constant late arrival to work, but they should not ask you where you live. And I'm going to share with you what the article says because I want to see what you think about this question being asked as well, and to give you some more food for thought if you are ever asked this question. So, unless you are required to live within a specific distance of your job, like someone who works in law enforcement, there may be a requirement that if you're a county or a city law enforcement officer, you may there may be a requirement that you live within that jurisdiction. Well, that's understandable. And so, and the article says, such as if you are on a local police force or you work in a government capacity in a region, employers are not entitled to know anything about your living situation unless you decide, excuse me, to share that with them. And it goes on to say that this also goes for whether you rent or own. That's nobody's business, or what you pay per month for your home. And so just keep that in mind as well, because that is also illegal. There is no reason for an employer, in most cases, to ask you, where do you live? Unless you are being considered for a law enforcement position that requires you to live within a certain distance of your jurisdiction or within your jurisdiction, or if you're being considered for a government job, a local, county, city government job, and they want you to be connected to the community that they serve. And so they require all of their employees to live within that particular region or governmental jurisdiction. So there you have it, 13 illegal um, illegal interview questions that some employers are still asking. And so I'm not going to leave you without giving you some tips on how to address that. So when and if you're asked an illegal interview question, just know that some employers could be using that as a test. One, to see if you know what questions you should or should not be asked, or two, and especially if you're an HR professional, if you're asked an inappropriate or an illegal job interview question, you need to speak up and say, well, as an HR professional, experienced HR professional, or even if you're not experienced, if you're being asked and you're an entry level professional, that's why it's so important to have strong interview preparation, because then you can say, um, well, Mr. Interviewer or Ms. Interviewer, I am aware that this is an inappropriate or illegal job interview question to ask. So I see that you're testing me to find out whether I really know HR. So I hope that I pass that test because I know that I should not answer that question. And so you will have in a very professional way that still infuse a little bit of humor and does not cause additional tension in the interview process. You've let them know that, hey, that's an inappropriate a question, and I hope that you asked me that question, to see what I really know related to HR to determine how successful I might be on the job here. But I know that I should not answer that. And guess what? You should be able to move on to the next question. Otherwise, if you're asked an illegal or inappropriate interview question, then again, even if you're not an HR professional that's interviewing for an HR position, just say, um, I would not like I am declining to answer that question because I am aware that by law employers are not authorized to ask that question, and I am not required to answer it. However, I'd be more than happy to consider other questions that are appropriate for the interview process. And again, you've handled yourself so eloquently and appropriately in the face of potential adversity that you're leaving the door open to continue talking about your knowledge, skills, and abilities related to the job that you're being considered for. A couple of tips though: don't unless you're being treated in a way that is bullying or um, unsafe or what have you. Don't just get up and walk out of the interview. Explain to them that unfortunately the questions that you keep asking me are inappropriate, even illegal interview questions, and so I am respectfully asking that my that consideration, um, that I no longer be considered for this position. Totally fine, totally appropriate. And I would like to excuse myself now. I thank you for your time and consideration, and I wish you well in your excuse me, selection process. And just if you get two inappropriate interview questions from an employer during a an interview, that would be just what I would do. I would either continue to decline to answer and explain to them why, because it's an illegal interview question, or I would just say that's the second inappropriate interview question that I've been asked. This makes me feel very uncomfortable, so I am asking that um, my candidacy be that I no longer be considered for this opportunity, and I am about to excuse myself from this interview. But I wish you well in finding your ideal candidate. A lot of people don't have the strength or the confidence to do that. But if you do, you're probably going to garner more of their respect, and they'll probably want you on their team even more because they will ask you to provide them with guidance on how to navigate this landscape to make sure that they remain compliant. So don't be surprised if refusing to answer an illegal or inappropriate interview question. Don't be surprised if it leads to an even better potential career opportunity, because it could definitely happen. And then also run a background check on yourself ever so often, like once a year or whatever, so that you can see what's contained in your file, so that you are not surprised if something does come up during your interview process. Who knows? Someone may already be aware, but maybe you had not been. informed um, of what's going on in your background or what have you. Well, I hope that this has been helpful to you. I know that a lot of people, like I said at the onset, a lot of people are not familiar with what inappropriate interview questions look like. So I hope that this list of 13 has helped you tremendously and will go a long way to helping you to live your best career life. And I am so grateful that you've joined me today. Also, know, as I said, that I am on, as I always say, that I am on a mission to help you live your best career life. So if you found value in this content today, please click on the like button so that that will let the algorithms know that you found value and others may too, and that'll help my information, this content, to reach others like you who are also on their journey to living their best career life. If you would like to work with me more closely, I will have all of the information regarding the resources that I offer in the description below the video. When the replay video is rendered and available for you to view. Also, I mentioned my 80-year-old cousin who I met this past weekend, who is also an author, and his name is Thomas Rembert. And I'm going to put his information, his web address, as well as his the name of his book, the title of his book, in case you're interested in reading it. So until next Friday, I hope you have a safe weekend and next week. Wishing you nothing but the best. And I look forward to seeing you next Friday. Career success to you and take care.